All right, Deep Dig 49ers faithful fans, we have a special guest today to preview week one versus the Bears. We have Kevin Lapka from Bears Nation Podcast. You want to introduce yourself, kind of describe your podcast a little bit, what you got going on over there?
Yeah, Drew, thanks for having me on, man. Excited to talk some football with you. Can't believe week one is almost here. I know you're just as excited as I am, but as you mentioned, yes, host of Bears Nation podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all over the place. Also, content producer at 670 The Score, Chicago, number one sports radio station in the city. So if we have any Chicago people listening here, make sure you listen to 670 The Score and Bears Nation podcast. But yeah, Drew, happy to be on here. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, anytime. And I had to wear a Niners jersey. I usually just wear whatever t-shirt, but
Gotta do it. Gotta do
gotta
it.
represent today. um, yeah, man. So before we get into like any predictions, I know a lot of fans are getting heated on Twitter. The Bears fans, the Niners fans are kind of going at it, man. What are your thoughts on all that Twitter beef? A lot of people trashing each other's rosters, man.
That's how it goes, man. Right before week one, it gets heated. The beef starts to build up. And, the Bears and the 49ers don't really have a feud in general. We're not big rivals. And if anything, Bears fans love the 49ers because of what you guys have done to Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. We appreciate you year after year ensuring that Aaron Rodgers does not get another Super Bowl. So, Robbie Gold, longtime Bear, current kicker of the Niners, we have some love there. So, look, I have no animosity towards the San Francisco 49ers every week except for this week. I got a little something against you guys this week. Again, week one. And, this is it's an interesting season for both of us. And I know Bears fans, like the thing you have to understand about Bears fans is they'll get riled up regardless, right? There's people who believe the Bears could be one of the worst teams in the league. And you'll see where I am at on that spectrum later in the show. But regardless of whether the Bears are going to be 0-17 or 17-0, Bears fans are going to get hyped up. They're going to talk their ish and they're going to get ready to play. So the one thing I can tell you is on Sunday, you're going to have Soldier Field jam-packed with a bunch of drunk Chicagoans who are ready to go, regardless of what people think about the Bears. But yeah, what do you think about the beef, man?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm excited to see the crowd going crazy on both ends. I think it's a matter of just like the timing. I feel like both teams are in this weird zone of quarterback and
Right.
for quarterbacks for both teams we're unsure of. Just in touchy subjects for both teams, and it just so happened that we got scheduled week one and both sides are ready to blow up on the topic. Bears are kind of in a more touchy spot where they feel like they got disrespected last year. They did end up winning 6 games, but people talk about them like they were like the bottom of the league. And new head coach, young quarterback, I think it's a lot more promising than 49ers fans are willing to admit. But I think, yeah, it's just like a matter of we got scheduled week one, so fans are ready to go.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you are right about the similar situations as well. Two young quarterbacks, obviously, the narrative there about them being in the same draft class. And while I don't really believe that there's like additional motivation for Justin Fields to go out there and prove the Niners wrong. I mean, we're past that point. They played last year, and Justin played well last year. But I don't. I think there's people who, and the game's on Fox. I'm sure Fox is going to brew something up like Justin Fields is out to prove the Niners wrong. Like I think we're beyond that point. But you are right about the situations being similar, and yeah, it is crazy that we got lined up for week one with kind of a similar idea for both teams.
Yeah, man. So before we dig into the game, let's kind of learn a little bit more about the Bears from because on the outside looking in, we just know Justin Fields, we know the highlights. What are your storylines for the Bears like that everyone, should be aware of going into the season?
So there's a lot of storylines. A lot happened to this offseason. Obviously, you change regimes, you change GM, head coach, and then you bring in a lot of different talent. You cut a lot of guys. There's only 16 guys on the roster this year who were on the roster last year. So, big roster overhaul, a lot of really young, talented rookies. 9 of the rookies from the draft class, made the team. Very deep draft class for Ryan Poles. They traded down. They got a lot of additional picks. And, they're one of the youngest teams in the NFL after being one of the oldest teams in the NFL last year. But, I'm not going to go through every little thing. Here's the one thing I can tell you as far as what is going to be indicative of how good and, how good the Bears can potentially be is the new head coach in Matt Eberflus and what he's bringing to the table and the rest of his staff and the identity that the Bears have built this offseason. And the difference between that and what was existing last year and the years prior with Matt Nagy is why the Chicago Bears are kind of, you even mentioned it. I think you were a little willing to admit that they're kind of going under the radar, and everyone wants to put them in the same tier as the Jaguars and the Seahawks and the Texans, and those bottom feeder teams. And there's plenty. I think USA Today had them winning like 2-3 games, having them being the number 1 overall pick. And the bottom line is this team, you mentioned, it won 6 games last year, and through the last 3 preseason games and all the offseason, people within the Bears community, and I understand why people nationally wouldn't, see this because they're not tuning into the Bears every day at training camp. You're not going to understand it until games start. The Chicago Bears were damaged by Matt Nagy more than you could ever imagine. And specifically the offense, specifically Justin Fields, his development, but also just the way the team played, the way the team, hustled to the ball, the effort, being prepared for a game day. I mean, how many times last year did the Chicago Bears score 0 points in the first half? How many times, were they, not ready to play out of the, gates from the start, out of the gates in the second half? What you have now is you have a team based off of the hits principle that, Matt Eberflus has implemented with them, that throughout the preseason, throughout training camp, when I was there and everything that I've witnessed, like, they are ready to go, man. They're ready to play. They don't care what anyone thinks of them. They're going to hustle to the ball. They're going to play hard. They're going to put in their maximum effort. And, those things are just as important to winning as X's and O's are. And that's what I've learned. But almost more importantly than that is the fact that you have an offensive system now that understands and tailors to the strengths of Justin Fields. Luke Getsy comes in and he says, you know what, we're going to completely overhaul this and we're going to put Justin Fields in the right position. Now they have an offensive line that's improved. Tevin Jenkins is moving to right guard. That was our 2nd round pick last year, obviously fell to us. And, there's rumors of him being traded early in the offseason. They decided to move him to guard. And he's proved to be better at that spot. He's going to be the starter there. They signed Riley Reef. He's not going to start, but that's depth that they have at the position. They've got a rookie at 5th rounder, Braxton Jones at left tackle, who looks really good. New center from Green Bay. They signed to a 2-year contract. Lucas Patrick, he's going to be, kind of a stale, stalwart on that offensive line. And then at left guard, you got Cody Whitehair. He's been a name for about 4 or 5 years. He's played really well, been a Pro Bowl caliber guy on that line. So the line is improved, but the number one thing is you have a scheme that tears to the strength of Justin Fields, and you're seeing designed rollouts and bootlegs, and they're running this outside zone concept. They're going to run the football a lot, and like and going back to what I initially said, like, to me, the damage done by Matt Nagy, like, that's 2 to 3 games on the schedule, like that you can flip. So when I look at this team this year, I think that they can be, a winnable team, and they're going under the radar, and all the moves they made this offseason and the identity they brought in. This is going to be a team they're not going to be a Super Bowl contending team. They're not going to you're not going to win the NFC North, right? Could they push for a 7th seed in the wild card? Maybe they could. I think they potentially could. But the bottom line is, is it pertains to what we're talking about here, Bears Niners week 1, this team's got something to prove, and they're going to be ready to play. And if the Matt Nagy was coach of this team, I'd be here saying no effing shot they got a chance to win. But this is a new identity, new team, and an offense that tears to the strength of Justin Fields. So that's a little lowdown on what the Bears have done this offseason generally. And look, I want to hear about the Niners too, because again, the thing about all of this is, throughout training camp, there's 32 teams, and we trust national sources, right? But national sources don't do their, deep dives on these teams. They don't see these teams on a daily basis like you and I do as we cover these teams as analysts day by day. So, I would like to say that people like you, Drew, and I, we know a little bit more about these team situations than national analysts. Hence why they should be listening to this podcast if they're looking.
As someone that's like covering the Niners and really following them, you do learn those little bit of ins and outs of the nitty gritty of the roster.
Right.
And, I did a little research on the team, and I think looking from the outside in, if you're just the national consumer, you're looking at Eberflus, and you're looking at a new head coach, unproven. Justin Fields, a young quarterback that some people still don't believe in. So from the outside, and then you got a lot of young guys, a lot of like just not household names. So I feel like that just feeds into it. And then you have this like Roquan Smith debacle going on, and let's touch on what you touched on a little bit. Some of these young guys like Cole Kmet, Herbert, Montgomery, Jalen Johnson. Do you think these are like immediate impact guys, or are there any other young guys that are immediate impact, or are they still taking those steps, and like maybe a year or two, these guys are going to really affect that team?
So when you talk about guys like Cole Kmet and Jalen Johnson, they're going into their third year. Like this is going to be their year. Like Jalen Johnson has been really, really good. This is his year to be a Pro Bowler. This is Cole Kmet's year to finally be, a 700-yard, 800-yard receiver, a guy who's going to maybe get 90 receptions on the year, right? So those guys, are getting to that point. And another thing to mention is, this coaching staff in comparison to Matt Nagy's coaching staff has been, exceptionally good at developing these guys. And that was something that Matt Nagy never did. I mean, you could take maybe 3 guys in his entire tenure that he really developed well. No one in that coaching staff, not one player, you did not see vertical linear progression as far as, their development. But you talk about young guys across the board. I mentioned Braxton Jones, the 5th rounder left tackle. Now it's going to be tough for him, right? First game in the NFL. And guess who he sees on the opening snap? He sees Nick Bosa. So, as much as Bears fans are real excited about Braxton Jones as a sleeper from the draft, well, guess what? I don't care how good you are when you're going up against Nick Bosa as a rookie. It's going to be an interesting matchup to say the least there. But you go to the defensive side of the ball, and this is where you start to see the young guys come around. We talk about 2 secondary guys, your 2 second-round draft picks. You got Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. Kyler Gordon, cornerback out of Washington, a freak athlete, one of the most athletic cornerbacks to ever come out of the draft. That guy's gonna, he's gonna go one-on-one against Deebo Samuel at times in the slot. He's playing a lot of slot corner right now, and I think that's where they're gonna have him lined up there in the nickel. So Kyler Gordon is a guy you have to remember, but the guy that I want you to think about most, who's going to make an impact if healthy, he's been injured, is Jaquan Brisker, safety out of Penn State. This second rounder is an absolute dog. Now, we had his trainer on our podcast last week. He also trains Aaron Donald. This guy's name's Dwayne Two Tenths Brown. He trains Sky Moore. A bunch of other guys around the league. And, he was being real with us. I know it's his trainer, but he was saying he thinks Jaquan Brisker can be an all-pro Hall of Fame type player, and he thinks he's got a real shot at being Defensive Rookie of the Year. It's kind of rare that a safety wins that award. But Jaquan Brisker is a name. And look, man, the number one thing that you're going to see out of these young guys on both offense and defense, and this was the identity for the Chicago Bears when they entered the draft, is we are looking for extremely athletic, explosive players. This is a very, very, very fast football team. They're going to get to the ball fast, and their identity on offense is moving the ball around. You think about another guy, Velus Jones Jr., 3rd-round rookie out of Tennessee. That guy is a freak athlete, sort of a gadget guy who can do it all, and they hope he can be their Deebo Samuel. He's super versatile in that way, super fast. So, these young guys, man, they're coming in with a vengeance, and a lot of them, like Velus Jones Jr. is 23 years old. You got a lot of older, mature guys, and this team in the preseason, although they are young, was very, very disciplined. And that was something that Matt Eberflus was exceptional at in Indianapolis. His defense for the past 3 years was always top 3 in penalties. And I think they made like 4 or 5 penalties all of the preseason. I mean, they are a very disciplined football team, but these young guys, man, the guys that you're going to hear on Sunday who Niners fans currently don't know about, who might be like, okay, this guy might be able to play a little bit, are Velus Jones Jr., Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, Braxton Jones, and then definitely keep an eye on, Jalen Johnson, Cole Kmet. And, I know you know this name, but I don't know if people in your market know how good this guy can actually be. Darnell Mooney, if you have not drafted yet in your fantasy league, that's a guy that I would watch out for too. But, again, as much as I love having a young football team, there's growing pains. There's always going to be growing pains. And when you have to face a veteran team in the Niners who's been there, they've been to the playoffs a number of times, and in the bigger moments, in the NFC championships, in the Super Bowl, just 3 years or 4 years ago, right? And a great, very well coached team, Kyle Shanahan. It's going to be a little bit different playing the 49ers versus another team week 1 when you got such a young team. So.
Yeah, and that's specifically why I wanted someone from the Bears side to come on this podcast, because a lot of Niners fans just writing this off as a trash roster. The Bears, like, they have nobody. But when you actually look into and dig into the numbers, they were competitive last year. They're gonna be competitive this year, and it's all about, if you win 6 games, there's those 4 or 5 games that don't fall your way, like 1 or 2 things don't fall your way, and it could very easily change the next season. So I just want 49ers. I'm not saying the Bears gonna win the game, but I just want the 49ers. I just want the 49ers fans to be aware that these aren't pushovers coming in. It's gonna be competitive. They're gonna compete from start to finish. And yeah, I actually want to dig into more. Let's get into some of these matchups. I wanted to know, like, what are you excited for, and what kind of worries you between these matchups, and then I can kind of dig into more of the Niner stuff when you throw it back at me.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, the number one thing that scares me is still that defensive front of the Niners, right? I mean, this is an offensive line that I think is going to be better than what you saw last year. I mean, if you remember that game, Bears Niners. I was actually looking at I was rewatching the highlights before this to kind of get myself prepared for this podcast. Now I was like, I think Justin Fields had around 100 rushing yards in that game, but it wasn't because it was designed. It was because he was having to break out of the pocket and do it himself, because that 49ers defensive front was destroying the Bears offensive line that day. And, you remember the one play everyone remembers is Justin Fields juking out, all those guys and getting into the end zone and the red zone. And one of the better plays for him and the best play for him last season. But again, like, that's not the way you want it. Like, yeah, it was a great play, but he had to, break loose out of the pocket in 0.5 seconds because the 49ers defensive front was manhandling them. So yes, I have optimism that this Bears offensive line is going to be improved and better than last year, but you still have young guys, man, like Larry Borom on the right tackle. He's a second-year player. Tevin Jenkins at guard. He's a second-year player, but this is his first year playing guard. He played tackle last year. On the left side, I mentioned the fifth-rounder Braxton Jones, and you got the two veterans in the middle. So, not only is this a young line, but it's also a line that this line on Sunday that you're going to see has not played together at all. Lucas Patrick has been out with a hand injury since the beginning of training camp, so they haven't played as a coherent unit at all in the preseason. So that scares me a little bit as far as, week one, what we're going to see with the 49ers defensive front against the Bears O-line. So if I had to pinpoint one matchup that terrifies me most, it's that. So I want to hear your lowdown on what you think about the Niners defensive front going up against the Bears there, and whether you think that they're going to have success.
Yeah, and that's the matchup specifically I wanted to focus on going in, because this is the matchup that I think most weeks the 49ers are going to be winning hands down. This D-line is loaded this season, even more compared to past years, and it's deep. It's so deep. We have Nick Bosa on one end, and then we have the rookie Drake Jackson on the other, and that kid is looking like a steal in the second round. He is athletic. He can play every down. He came in, we were thinking he could be maybe just a third down blitzer, but he's been all around player, and he doesn't even have to be, because we also brought back Kerry Hyder, who was amazing in our system. He went to Seattle and struggled, but he's back now. Obviously we have Eric Armstead in the middle, and he's naturally better in the middle. We always kind of kicked him out, but now that we have more depth, we keep him in the middle there. And if we get anything out of Javon Kinlaw this season, the guy has been a monster. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of him at practice, but he makes other humans look like children. And then just the depth. We have Omenihu, who could come in and just bull rush players. We have Hassan Ridgeway in the middle. It's just, we're going to be throwing guys at the Bears constantly the whole game, and they're all going to be fresh. And if you look at Nick Bosa's tape, he actually performs better in the fourth quarter. That's where a lot of his sacks come from. When the other guys get tired, Nick Bosa is not tired. And I'm suspecting a lot of these young guys on the Bears line going to be a little gassed at the end of the game when they're trying to contain Nick Bosa for three quarters. And then you're trying to double Nick Bosa. But on the other side, you have a lot of guys who are going to win those one-on-one matchups. So that's the matchup that I think the 49ers are really going to get away with in this one.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, you're talking about a matchup that I think the Bears can have success, and it's kind of out of the box here, but it's like Matt Eberflus versus Trey Lance. I mean, and what I mean is Matt Eberflus is not going to make life easy for Trey Lance here at the start of the season. Can we basically say Trey Lance is a rookie here? I mean, It pretty much feels that way, and Matt Eberflus he's creative, he's smart, and he's going to throw things. He's going to make life very, very hard for Trey Lance. And the defense in general, like, this is a very fast defense. Roquan Smith is an extremely good player. And, a lot, like, the past 3 weeks, he's had everyone in his ear saying, you are not better than Fred Warner. You are not deserving of $19 million Fred Warner money, hence why he didn't get the contract extension. I think Roquan Smith, and look, I agree with that too. Like, I don't think he was worthy of getting the $19 million, or he wanted $20 million. That's why the contract didn't get through. He wanted to be the highest paid linebacker in the NFL, and Ryan Poles specifically is like, dude, you're not Shaq Leonard yet, right? We can't give you that kind of money yet. And I think he understood that. That's why he's playing out the contract. But I think Roquan Smith has something to prove. But the linebacker next to them, playing at the mic, is Nicholas Morrow, a guy that we got from the Raiders on a 2-year deal, super fast, super young, athletic. He's a guy to look out for too. And the secondary is, I said young but talented, but it's really the Bears defensive front that a lot of people haven't been talking about. It's almost like everyone forgot Robert Quinn didn't, record or break the Bears record in sacks last year. Like, Robert Quinn broke the Chicago Bears record in sacks last year. And everyone knows the famed history of Chicago Bears defenders. So for him to do that is exceptional, and people are just kind of writing him off. Like, This guy is a top 10 edge rusher right now. And then in the middle, they signed Justin Jones from the Chargers, good player. And then they just picked up a waiver wire pickup from the Vikings, Watts, who's going to be in the middle. And then on the other side, you got Al-Qaeda Muhammad, a name to remember. This guy can play. He was with the Colts and the Colts defense with Matt Eberflus there. Super athletic, super quick, but also a very, very good run defender. We know the 49ers are going to try to look to run the ball a lot. So I just think Matt Eberflus has a plan. He's going to do his homework on, the limited tape you have on Trey Lance in the preseason. That he's going to make life difficult for him. He's going to throw a lot at him. He's going to do a lot of blitzes. He's just going to make things difficult. And it's not just it's Matt Eberflus just scheming it to difficulty. No, like the Bears defense is going to be a good unit this year, and they're going to get takeaways. That's why they brought Matt Eberflus in, top 10 in takeaways every year that Matt Eberflus was the defensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts. The one thing the Bears were terrible at, well, not the one thing, the one of many things they were terrible at last year was they couldn't get a damn takeaway. That's why they brought Matt Eberflus in. The matchup for me is Eberflus and that defense versus Trey Lance, making life hard on him because, look, I can tell you from experience, it doesn't matter sometimes how good your weapons are. I mean, the 49ers have great offensive weapons. They got George Kittle. They've got Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. Like, they're still going to make things hard for that offense and for Trey Lance.
Yeah, I totally agree. To me, it is going to be Trey Lance's basically rookie year. Right. I don't think he earns that second year title until he plays about 15, 16 games. But it is going to be how simple can we keep it for Trey Lance and still be effective against that defense. And Eberflus is going to disguise some things, throw some schemes at him that he hasn't seen. And he's still, he could still make some mistakes. He's still young. But with his playmaking ability, the weapons we have, I think we can still keep it simple and breaks here and there. I mean, Deebo, all we have to do is get the ball in that guy's hands and he's going to make something happen. And I think what mirrors these teams too is the offensive line play is questionable for both coming in. The 49ers obviously have Trent Williams. That side of the line is locked down. But on the other side, on the right tackle, we have McGlinchey, who is not a fan favorite at all. People question his size.
Good to know.
He gets a little touchy about that subject. But his pass blocking isn't the greatest. We just need him to be an average right tackle in the league to get by. And our interior of the line has been just a question mark all offseason. We didn't invest in anything. We let Laken Tomlinson walk for nothing. And so we're relying on Spencer Buford. I believe he's a 4th round pick. And he's been amazing in preseason. Everyone's saying that guy is going to be perfect. He's been loading up on the pancakes during the preseason. And he looks good, but still a young guy. And it looks like Jake Brendel might be our starting center, who's still an unknown. And on the other side, left guard position is our biggest question mark. Aaron Banks, the 2nd round pick from last year, looks like he's going to be the guy just because of draft position. We have to play this guy. He didn't play any downs last year, and we got to see what we have in him. He hasn't impressed. He lost first team reps to an undrafted rookie, Jason Poe, at the end of preseason, and Poe ended up on our practice squad. People are calling for that guy to actually start, that's another unknown, another undrafted young guy who cleared waivers and made the practice squad. So what does that tell you about our offensive line right now? We picked up a couple different guys on waiver claims, but I think that's going to be our starting 5. And I'm not feeling great about it, but with the mobility of Trey Lance and our running backs, our running back stable is looking amazing this year. Elijah Mitchell, if he could come in healthy, I think he's tweaked a little something right now, but he should be okay. Jordan Mason, an undrafted rookie, he's looking explosive for us. And Jeff Wilson Jr. is always a solid back. I feel like he could be a solid starting back or number 2 for another team, but right now he's just in the rotation. And we also have the rookie TDP, Davis Price out of LSU. That guy, he comes in with a lot of hype. He's someone that people see a potential starting role for him in the future. If not for this team, another team. He just has that kind of pop to him, and I think that could be the difference maker in this game. If we can control the tempo like Kyle Shanahan wants to do with this run game, not necessarily the O-line dominating, but with the schemes that Kyle can put together. And that's another thing. Can Kyle still do those run schemes without his mastermind offensive coordinator back there? Right. And that's just another question mark going in. I do think, too, our secondary is something that I'm a little concerned about. with your speed on that side of the field and Daryl Mooney specifically, we have a lot of injuries in the secondary right now. And that's another position group that we didn't invest money into. We kept the guys we liked and we believed in, and then we just added, bottom dollar guys who are good, but you're not getting top of the line output every week out of these guys. You're really depending on them to have a game here or there. So that's the matchup that really worries me is if someone could take the top off of this defense, everything could fall apart.
And I got bad news for you, because that's literally the entire Bears offense. Is they have built their offense around guys who can take the top off the defense. That's the identity. Is they're going to try to have an extremely fast and quick offense. It's gonna be very hard to defend. You're looking at Darnell Mooney, who's a 4-4 guy. Byron Pringle's a 4-5 guy. Velus Jones Jr. is a 4-3 guy. Equanimeous St. Brown, I think, is also a 4-4 guy. Like, you have a bunch of speedsters on this team, let alone the quarterback is almost the fastest of them. So, you have a real opportunity for the Bears. I mean, Jimmy Ward's on IR, and Charvarius Ward, he's questionable to play. Do you guys think he's going to play? What's his injury status?
Last I checked, he's going to play. We're hoping that he wouldn't start. We'd rather go with George Odom, but it seems like the 49ers staff really likes Tavares Moore, even though he got burnt by the Packers in a preseason game. So it's looking like it's going to be Tavares Moore.
Okay. So, nonetheless, like, this secondary the Bears can expose it. So, like, Darnell Mooney is a guy to look out for. I think his over-under, I don't know if you do a lot of betting, but his over-under for receiving yards week 1 is only like 60 yards. So I might have to hit the over on that. But they're going to throw a lot of things at you. And again, you mentioned the name earlier, Cole Kmet. Like, this is a guy who this preseason and this offseason has really taken a step that a lot of people didn't think he was going to take. We as Bears fans and analysts no one really loved the pick when we selected him in the second round 3 years ago. We thought there was better guys on the board. Specifically, myself wanted Antoine Winfield Jr. He was available. Obviously went to Tampa Bay, won a Super Bowl that year. Of course, he walked right into a perfect situation, but that's a guy I thought they should have drafted. So Cole Kmet, he's really developed, and he's a really, really tough player. He's not the fastest, tight end, and he's nowhere near, as athletic or explosive as George Kittle or anyone, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, the people in the top echelon of tight ends. But what the guy does is, he makes catches and he breaks tackles. Like, he is a hard guy to bring down. Now, he's not the biggest threat in the red zone, and that's where, people get a little bit concerned is, 0 touchdowns last year. And yeah, they had Jimmy Graham there and Jesse James who were kind of taking up red zone snaps, but they're going to get really creative in the red zone. They're going to do a lot of different things. And Luke Getsy, if you guys kind of remember, you're playing the Packers as many times as you have the past couple of years, this guy loves in the red zone to do a lot of different motions and gadgets and just scheme guys open. And if you can think, I'm sure they did it to you guys at some point, he just sends Davante Adams in motion and has him run a little dig route, and he's wide freaking open because the cornerback's got to follow him all the way across the field. They're going to do creative things in the red zone with the amount of speed they have. Look for Byron Pringle, Velus Jones Jr., Darnell Mooney to get schemed open in those areas against, a secondary that is a little bit questionable. And again, the Bears offensive personnel is not threatening to anyone, and I'll be one to admit that as well. Like, I think Darnell Mooney is going to be a 1,200-yard receiver, but obviously it's not a great unit. Do I think it's better than what everyone is making it out to be? I see jokes on Twitter that the prison system has a better receiving corps than the Chicago Bears. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but they have the tools to surprise people a little bit. Like, yeah, the talent's not there, but because they have such a fast offense, and let alone a very, very good running back in Dave Montgomery and a great number 2 in Khalil Herbert, who's going to get a lot of reps on Sunday, they can do enough on offense to win this game, which, in my opinion, is going to be a lower scoring game anyway. This isn't going to be a shootout, obviously. I think we're going to be looking at somewhere 24, 21, 24, 20, something like that. And last year was 33, 22. So something like that.
I think that's going to be the narrative every week for the 49ers because that's what our defense is built on. Cheap secondary play, a dominant D-line play, and then we find gems in the middle of the defense with the linebacking core. And our linebacking core is amazing with Azeez Al-Shaair, Dre Greenlaw, and Fred Warner. They all can cover. They all can play the run. So as long as we contain that, and a name to remember all season long, who, if you want to talk about defensive rookie of the year, Samuel Womack III. This is a guy that is a ball hawk. He is all over the field. He shined in the preseason. They actually cut Darqueze Dennard after a highlight game from Sam Womack. And we really needed this guy to come on strong because we let K'Waun Williams walk, who was our star nickel corner. And this Samuel Womack kid, he can play inside, he can play outside. He's going to be a nickel starter for us from the get-go. this guy is going to be someone who can help us contain those plays.